Welcome to today's episode of A Facilitator's Journey. Today I'm talking to Kate Jones. Kate is a leadership consultant and coach and a life coach. She and I talk about her decision to leave the corporate world, and in her own words, it was a bid for life. We then talk about the serendipity of finding that first gig on leaving the corporate world. We then carry on the conversation as we talk about loneliness versus autonomy, the need for being in a community. We then talk about our professional development and also the benefit of having a supervisor. So grab a cup of tea, grab a drink of choice, pull up a chair and enjoy this episode. Kate, welcome to A Facilitator's Journey. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Really well. Yeah, beautiful spring-ish day. So yeah, I'm good.
It's happening, isn't it? So Kate, it's a question I ask everybody, how do we know one another?
We know each other because I think maybe about 2 years ago, I attended a couple of your campfires.
Yeah.
And then actually I asked you, but then I also approached you because I was thinking about doing the Dent Accelerator. And since then, we've been dancing around each other on social media, on LinkedIn, I think.
Lush. So, Kate, can you describe for our listeners what you do so they get a sense of you?
So I am a leadership and life coach. I have been running Neon, my little practice, my little business for 11 years this month, miraculously. So the majority of my work is organizational work. Thanks. So most of my work is working with teams and individual leaders trying to create what I call more deeply human organizations. And then I also coach individuals, kind of successful professionals who are wanting to create big changes in their life or work because they're feeling unfulfilled. I describe it as the early midlife crisis, which might reappear actually in our conversation.
So the ethos of A Facilitator's Journey podcast is about understanding nuances of people's business to help others learn from us, learn from what works, learn from our mistakes or even downright failures. So let's start at the beginning. How did you start? How did you decide you were going to leave a corporate consulting career to become Neon?
Well, I would love to say that it was part of a very clear sort of plan and intention on my part. I think most perhaps sensible people kind of assume that that's what you have to do and that's the way it goes. But in my case, it was more a result of an increasing kind of sense of discontent and knowing that I wanted to do something else. And having some sort of vague notion of what that was. The two words, I remember talking a lot about I want to do something more creative, and I wanted to do something of my own. But then in the end, did I line up a whole load of clients? No. I ended up kind of resigning with a sort of part-time gig that was going to happen, which actually then by the time I'd resigned was not going to happen. So I found myself at the beginning of 2013 in this kind of brand new space of, I had a name of a business and a sort of an intention and certainly a lot of dreams and wishes, but not really a plan. And it has kind of, 11 years later, it has evolved.
So interestingly, this is a conversation that's really alive at the moment in certain groups that I'm in, where people have left corporates and they had been promised some work like part-time to cover themselves, and then it's been retracted for various reasons, or people have left and they're really struggling to find that first gig, like as an associate or even with their own clients. Tell us what happened for you then. So you thought you were going to have some part-time work, which is great because it gives us reassurance. But then that got pulled away. So
Yeah,
what happened next?
it was funny really, because I think, I definitely reached a point. It had probably been a few years. I'd been at PA, the consulting firm that I worked at for 10 years, but in the last 2 years probably I'd taken a sabbatical, and after the sabbatical had changed practice in the firm. So these were kind of attempts of sorts to sort of find what I was looking for. Trained as a coach actually also in that same period of time. And then, I knew, I had this kind of sense, oh, I just need to wait until the right thing comes along. But I had no idea really what that was. And then in the end, I got this kind of, it was actually with the Mind Gym, which lots of people will, I'm sure, will know. It was some sort of part-time, I can't remember what it was, some sort of freelance thing. And then for reasons that, again, I can't really even explain, I think they decided that there actually wasn't any work. And so I'd already decided I was going to resign, but not actually announced it I hadn't communicated it to the firm. So it was in that moment I had to decide, am I going to sort of change my mind and stay put, given that this work is not going to be there, or am I just going to jump off the cliff? And I decided I was just going to go for it.
So you jumped.
So I jumped. Yeah, much easier maybe for me to do. I don't have kids. I didn't have people, dependents that were sort of relying on me. And I get that for a lot of people, that's one kind of key reason, a concern about whether or not you'll be able to support your family, what have you. But obviously, I had concerns about. It did feel like a sort of massive leap of faith. But yeah, I think it was. My soul was kind of dying a little bit, not a little bit. It was dying a lot, and had been for quite a long time. And I just had this really strong sense that the me that I had become at that point in time just couldn't really get any more oxygen in the environment that I was working in. So
Right.
it was a bid for life. And I think, in terms of kind of what happened next, so I set up the company that was at the end of 2012 that I left PA. So I set up the company at the beginning of 2013. And then it was, to a large extent, it was kind of serendipity that sort of enabled me to get started, because I remember having lunch with somebody who had been my first ever client when I was at PA, and who by then was the chief exec of a social enterprise. And I was just kind of catching up with him, and I was saying, oh, I've left PA and I'm doing this. And he was like, oh, well, actually, I need some help with my leadership team. Would you be interested? And so I landed my first job, in the first month or two. Because I had not made, lots of people kind of line up contracts before they actually kind of make the leap and announce their resignation, but I had not done that. So that's kind of that's the sort of first piece of work I remember getting. And then another kind of big thing that year was that an old client introduced me to another consultancy firm that was looking for associates. And I think that's a very common way in which people kind of get going, is that they have some sort of relationship as an associate with an organization, that all the kind of stuff about finding your own work is kind of taken care of, because the consultancy does that and you rock up and deliver their work. I think the main thing is that, I was lucky to find a company that I really, shared values with and enjoyed the work that they do.
So one of the things I sort of encourage people to do before they pull the cord with the corporate is, one, save up enough money that there's going to be probably the first 6 months could be very, very quiet. And secondly, where you can get a contract as an associate, and or what you were going to do, go and work for somebody else, even part-time, that's a really good stepping stone. Because I left corporate Christmas 2007. You left in 2013. I was very lucky that I stepped into an associate role, and I was there for 7 years, and that was so beneficial. And it sounds similar for you.
Yeah.
I am unsure whether that is as easy in this day and age as we've walked into the 2020s. I think there's so many more people going freelance. I wonder if the pie has stayed the same size and the slices are getting slimmer and narrower. So finding those first jobs, I think whilst people might be dying inside, is please, please, please have some semblance of a plan before you do pull the cord, because some of the stories I'm hearing are just really sad that people are feeling very desperate out there and lonely,
Yeah.
trying to find work.
Yeah, and you know, in the
So
well, I mean, in the kind of coaching market, I mean, there's a lot of coaches, facilitators. You know, there's a lot of us out there. You know, and I am also approached a lot by people who are saying, "Oh, you know, how did you do it? I would love to do what you do." And I mean, yeah, I do love what I do, but it's not easy. Let's not over glorify you know, the reality of making it work. And I think we're going to maybe come on to talk about sort of personal circumstances and like, for example, it is quite a lonely experience to quite a large extent. And I think for me, COVID has definitely changed the way that I work quite a lot, and not for the better. You know, a lot more of my work is sitting at this very chair, at this very table, in front of this very screen, which is not really why I chose to do the kind of work that I do.
yeah, let's talk
Yeah.
about the loneliness piece. And like, firstly, how does the loneliness show itself for you? Like, what does that look like, sound like, feel like?
Well, it looks like spending. I mean, I live on my own, so it looks like I can spend unless I make a proactive effort to do something differently, I can spend an entire week sitting at my table in front of my laptop, um, without actually being in the same room as another human being. You know, and on the one hand, you know, the sort of the flip side, the flip side of the loneliness is the autonomy, and a like massive value of mine is freedom and autonomy, and I love that about what I do, and I cannot imagine how I was ever managed when I was when I was at PA, nor how I could ever have another boss ever again or be employed ever again. But you know, I get to choose what I do, when I do it, with whom I do it, how much of it I do, how much of time I take off, all within the constraints of the market, I guess. But the fact of the matter is, I am doing most of that on my own. And when you live on your own at the same time, you know, it's like it's a double whammy. So you do really need to like your own company quite a lot.
And I can absolutely concur, because like yourself, I live on my own, and there was definitely in the earlier years, in like 2008 to 2010, if I took a particular project, I might not talk to anyone all week because I was in design mode. And that was
Mm,
like, I did that for 3 weeks once in a row, and I'd only go out and play hockey at the weekends. And I realized I was going slightly stir crazy, and I
yeah,
couldn't operate like that. And I just knew that whilst the project had been great, it didn't fulfill me to see people. I think my it's changed for me now more and more, in that I plan out to go outside, I plan to go to the gym, I plan to see my
yeah,
best mate often on an evening. I do a lot of conversations virtually now. So even if I'm in design mode, I put in meetings and calls. I'm also finding community, I think, has been a real blessing. So we're at School of Facilitation, we have a very strong sense of community and practice, and other people I know, have different facilitation training, coaching
yeah,
communities that
yeah, yeah,
they go to. How about you? What communities have
yeah.
you looked into and connected to?
So it's kind of changed, I guess, over time. In the early years, I was very much part of the Coaches Training Institute, so the coaching schools that I've trained with. So CTI still does have has a large informal, supportive and sort of professional development kind of network and community that I was very much a part of in the early days. Then when I retrained with Third Space to do my PCC, what was that, 5 years ago or something, that there was the sort of tribe of those of us that had kind of been part of the same cohort over the course of that year. We're a very close knit community for a time. But for me, it's a kind of, I mean, again, it's I'm not somebody, I like kind of being on the outside of groups. I don't like being right in the middle. So again, I think I used to think that it was that I was always kind of an outsider. That's not actually true. I think my preference, my preferred place is to be part of a community, but to be just on the outside so that I have kind of room for maneuver. And I'm sure that's partly why, I've spent 20 years, 10 as a consultant and 10 as a coach consultant, sort of on the outside of client organizations, and obviously in the last 11 years kind of just within my own solopreneurship, as it were. But communities, I mean, also social communities, since I've been back in North London, because I went to Edinburgh for 4 years and then moved back to North London, and there I have found a community of women, and we all work out together, which has been an absolute kind of godsend. So for me, there are a number of small tribes of people that I kind of that I dip into. I've just actually kind of joined a Women in Change network as well, which this is my sort of 2024 kind of creation, or entering into a new kind of community. But it's so important. I think it's so important if you're working on your own.
Definitely. And I think so if you're listening to this and you're thinking, ooh, I want a community to hang out with, and some ones I'd recommend from a facilitation and training perspective. So Never Done Before with Miriam Hadnis. That's a very pan-European global community of practice and play for facilitation skills. If you're in the States listening to this, I would recommend checking out Voltage Control. They do a really good job on facilitation. There's the Facilitators Network down in New Zealand. There's a big facilitation community in Australia. The name escapes me, but I'll find it for you. You could go to Butter. You could go to Session Lab. There are many. There's the IAF as well. And all of them are different. And there's SOF, so we do something once a month. So it depends what you want. Do you want in person? Do you want virtual? Do you want just people to talk to? Do you want to do particular learning or practice sessions? So, but I would encourage everybody to go and find a community or a tribe, because it helps alleviate some of that loneliness. It gives you that immediate felt sense of team as well, that you can ask questions, you can get advice, because trust me, any question you put in that group, one of us has experienced it before. If not, everybody. So you'll get their thoughts and their ideas, and then that just really, I think, is sort of there. You don't have to try and make things up and work it out on your own, which I think is the biggest thing.
I mean, it is kind of tied into lifestyle, I guess, because if you're choosing to, I mean, I was very much choosing a sort of, mine is a lifestyle business. I have no desire or intention to build some kind of big thing. And there's a kind of flexibility, and there's sort of movement and variety, and some of the things that I most value in life that are sort of baked into it. But you do you have the opportunity to create a lifestyle around the way that you work, and it has to be a way that supports you and nourishes you. And I mean, in some ways, that's what we all have to do as kind of human beings on the planet. But I think it's just more obvious or more highlighted when you're kind of working on your own or running your own business, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Now, one of the conversations we had when we were talking about this was around, the importance of doing our own work, and that we are an instrument, or we are the instrument that ultimately means, how we do our work. What do you do for your own perspective, for your own professional development?
Loads is probably the kind of easy answer, or kind of quickest answer. I think I mean, I've certainly done a lot of actual professional development in terms of courses and training over the years. And I mean, I'm kind of naturally curious and easily bored, and always wanting to be sort of stimulated in some way, shape or form by the work that I do, and getting better at what I provide to clients. So that's an easy one. Although I would also say that there's a lot of people that I come across who approach me about getting started, and will be, do you recommend this course, or do I recommend that course? And so, there can often be a tendency to think I just need to do another course before I can really get started. And that's, sometimes it's like, what if you're actually enough just as you are, and you don't actually need, if you want to, if you're interested, then kind of go for it. But but also, I think some of the practices that, I mean, I have my own supervisor, who is an amazing woman, who's a sort of mixture of a supervisor, therapist, coach herself, and I just think that that's kind of good practice. And I've certainly had my own years of kind of therapy and personal work that have kind of preceded me. But then there are certain things,
Can
and
I
again,
ask
this is just,
Kate
yeah.
on that? Can I ask, what does it give you to have a supervisor as part of your personal development and in your professional space?
Well, first and foremost, somewhere where a forum for reflective practice. So because otherwise it's just you're in an echo chamber of just in your own world. So I get the opportunity to kind of take cases or dilemmas or challenges or experiences that I want to process or reflect on. So I get that, but I also get a kind of I would say a sense of an opportunity for nourishment and well-being in terms of my spirit, because I am, given the kind of work that I do, I am my own instrument of work. So how I am, how I'm feeling, my kind of mood, morale, sense of purpose, my energy, all of that is fundamental to what I provide to clients. So some of that I get from my supervisor, some of it I get from, it depends on the individual, but for me, some of it is about exercise. Some of it is about creativity. So for me, I use creativity quite a lot in my own work, but it's also because my own experience in terms of my sense of well-being is boosted by certain creative practices. So be it in my case there's singing and songwriting or writing poetry or painting or this practice visual medicine that I do, whatever it might be, they're all things that nourish me and give me a sense of vavavoom most of the time anyway.
And by doing that, what does it then mean when professional Kate shows up with her clients?
It means all sorts of things, I guess. First of all, I think there's a quality to my presence which is just enhanced, and presence is, I would say, about the most important. Like it's like the underpinning imperative for all of the work that I do is being present with teams, individuals, not just kind of present at, but present with. I think it increases my receptiveness and my ability to tune in to what's happening for people. I think it sharpens my ability to make sense of what I'm experiencing and reflect. I just think it makes me an all-round better practitioner and a nicer person. When we're exhausted and sort of distracted, we're just not as connected, right? A lot of my work is about connection, and the first thing you need to be able to do is to be sort of connected with yourself and then be able to connect with the external world and your client. So it helps with everything.
So we started the conversation talking about how you found your first gig, that initial piece of work. What happens now? Like now you've been going for 11 years. How do you find, how do clients find you, or how do you find your clients?
Well, it's a very sort of real time. Well, to be honest, there's never been a point in the 11 years when I have not stopped worrying about where the next piece of work is going to come from. It's like, and most of the people that I know that are self-employed will say the same thing. I mean, you get to the point, I guess, where you're like, oh, there's that worry, there's that anxiety voice in my head that's telling me my luck's going to run out now, and I'll never get another piece of work in my life. And you kind of recognize it and go, oh, there's that voice. What a load of rubbish. But it can still kind of, it can still get to you. I would say 95% of my work continues to come from my network. I had a fairly decent network as a result of being in consulting for 10 years. So there's a lot of people many of whom have kind of gone out into industry now, some of whom are still at the firm. And that has, if I were to track back all the pieces of work that I've done, quite a lot of them, probably directly or indirectly, have come through either my experience of clients that I worked with over those 10 years or colleagues of one kind or another. And then, you work with a client, they recommend you to someone else. So a lot of it is referral. I would say, 5% is probably work that I've competed for over the course of the 11 years. It's very rare that I engage in kind of competitive procurement processes. And I mean, but I mentioned the accelerator. So I've been doing this accelerator in the last year, and part of that is to play with, really, is to experiment with the idea of, like, what if I were to do it in a more structured way? What if I were to be a bit more disciplined in terms of a marketing strategy, or my use of social media, and that kind of thing. But it's been very organic. It has been very organic.
What do you do when there are gaps and quiet times in your diary?
Well, what I used to do is either kind of enjoy life or feel really down and anxious about when I was going to get more work. Now, I'm probably, there's that thing about working in the business and working on the business. So now I still kind of enjoy the downtime, because usually it's feast or famine. So it's like, well, 11 years in, you're sort of a bit wiser about, well, if it's a bit quieter now, why don't I sort of make the most of that time, knowing that it'll swing back round and I'll be kind of super busy and fretting about not being able to sleep enough. But now I'm kind of more likely to be found writing a blog post, or I have a kind of much more structured content marketing strategy now. So there's a lot more business. I'm setting up a community myself of people who are kind of engaged in what I call deeply human leadership. So who are interested in a forum of that kind that can bring people together, and there's people kind of cross industries and geographies. So there's kind of things that I do that are related to, that are intrinsic to the work that I do, but that are not necessarily paid client gigs.
Yeah, but also, it's paid in a different way, because what you're creating or what you're doing in those quiet times serves to attract future clients or to bring things about.
For sure.
So
for sure.
I think sometimes when people are thinking about doing those things, they're like, well, I'm not getting paid for that. It's like, that's not the way to think about the days that you are working, you get paid, and the days that you're not working with a client, you're not getting paid. I just don't see it like that anymore. I think you've got to smooth that out. Otherwise, you might start to get resentful when you're in creation mode. To your point, creating the community, writing a blog post. That's why you charge what you charge for a project, to cover you in those moments where you are working in the business. And on the business, sorry. Do you have a particular time of year where you've noticed where it suddenly seems to go quiet and the inner voice pops up? Because I do.
Well, I know that like July and August have always, like in the last 20 years of my career, have always been quieter. I guess it sort of makes sense, really. So now I sort of try to take as much time as possible off in August. It's just like, well, just circumvent the anxiety thing. What about you?
Yeah. I notice, so always plan for August being quiet, just absolutely standard. But the classic is December time, and I've been known, and my finance manager, Victoria, is brilliant. I will go, oh my God, we've got nothing in the diary. And she'll go, trust the void, Kirsty, trust the void. We've done this. This happens to us every year, Kirsty, trust the void. And my best mate as well, sometimes I'll text her and go, ah! And she's like, she's really logical, ex-banker. We've been here before, Kirsten. Like, you do this every year. Is this, she goes, we have this conversation every year. I delete that moment in my head, Kate, obviously, but everybody else remembers it and then reminds me. So August, I don't mind, because I just know that that's.
If you only have it once a year, then I salute you. Because I feel like my friends and family must be like, oh God, here she goes again. And they're sort of rolling their eyes going, oh, she's worrying, but it'll all be fine. But I'm still like, but no, this time it's like, it's definitely really worrying.
Yeah. Yeah. But actually,
Yeah.
it's really useful sometimes to take it outside of community to your family and friends, because they'll just give you the reality of check of, Kate, you've said this before.
Yeah, I know.
We know this,
That's true.
and it always turns good. And so I often say to my friends, if you want to roll your eyes at what I'm about to tell you, feel free. Like, so, like the work's come back, and they're like,
Oh
told you.
yeah, surprise, surprise. Yeah.
So one of the things we do on the podcast is we ask some quick fire questions of
Oh gosh.
our
Okay.
guests to give
Okay.
some inspiration to other people. So my first question is, what advice would you give to someone starting out?
I mean, it sounds really cliched. Follow your passion. Don't worry about a website. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, I need to have a website. It needs to be amazing. No, it doesn't. And trust. My goodness, talking about trusting the void. I mean, it's been the most amazing experience of learning to trust myself and life. This experience of being self-employed. That'd be some of my immediate tips.
Thank you. Who do you follow in social media land that you think others should know about?
Oh gosh. For some reason, I immediately thought of. Oh, I follow Richard van der Bloom, who is a LinkedIn kind of king. I think he's a Dutch guy. I'm a bit obsessed with LinkedIn. I follow Stephen Bartlett because he's kind of very personable and just come out. I do not follow. Everybody follows flipping Simon Sinek, and I'm just like, I'm over Simon Sinek. So you can scratch him off your list. Oh gosh. Who else do I follow that inspires me? There's actually a woman called Melissa Meredith who she will love it if she listens to this. Who's a woman who's out in the States, and I just came across her, and she's also a freelancer, but very speaks the same language as me in terms of wanting to create more deeply human organizations. So I love her posts.
Thank you. Is there a book or a podcast that you recommend to people?
Life-changing book for me, for those interested in kind of how organizations work and how they could work, is Reinventing Organizations by Frederic Laloux, which came out quite a long time ago now, but had a massive impact on me, and I still love that book.
I love that book as well. It's fascinating about teal organizations and flat structures and devolvement of leadership and decision making.
Exactly.
And the examples in there are fantastic, because you think, oh, it's going to be some sort of, these structures exist in big corporates, and then you're like, oh, it's a car manufacturer in France that we know the French are so bloody hierarchical. That was one. Another one was is it a tomato?
There's a tomato processing factory. Yeah, there is. Yeah, I think that was in the
Italy.
States. Oh, I thought, okay.
In the States.
I thought it was
and then
in the
there
States,
was I want to say there was an electricity manufacturer, but I could be making that up. And
possibly.
then the Dutch health company.
Yeah, the Dutch health company kind of became, I think the guy who ran the health organisation sort of became a sort of massive evangelical advocate of all things teal and self-managed organisations. I mean, a whole sort of industry has emerged from that work, some of which I've got more or less time for, but the book is a real inspiration, I think, and a real provocation in terms of, how we run organisations, and it's very much based on the premise, which is so kind of still so pertinent and real today, of like, why are so many people disengaged from their work and disengaged from the organization pool, even in sectors like teaching, and or maybe especially in organizations, public sector organizations, and more vocational professions, where you would imagine people have still got a sort of living sense of purpose and connection to what they do, but actually they're leaving in their droves. And there's a massive need to reinvent the way in which we work, the way in which we run our organizations. Brilliant book.
Final question. Tell us one thing you've done to invest in yourself that you think would benefit others to know about.
Well, what immediately comes to mind is I trained in something called visual medicine a few years ago, which is a painting and personal development practice that was developed by a wonderful, wise woman called Suzette Clough, who's based originally from New Zealand, based in northwest London. She's an artist and a psychotherapist, and she developed this this painting practice called visual medicine, which combines mindfulness, an actual method of painting that doesn't involve brushes and in which literally anybody can do and produce really beautiful results, and kind of personal inquiry and healing. She's remarkable. The practice is incredible. So I trained in her, became a visual medicine facilitator, but it was just the most wonderful, soul enhancing practice that I still love very much and kind of practice in my life and in my work.
Beautiful. Thank you. If people want to connect with you, find you, how should they do that?
Well, my website is www.deeplyneon.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. So Kate Jones Neon at LinkedIn, and you can also find me on Instagram, which is a bit like this, a bit more of a sort of behind the scenes kind of Kate, what she kind of gets up to, and more of a focus on the living well stuff, so on the life coaching stuff. So I'm neon_living on Instagram, and always love to hear from folk and to connect with new people. So drop me a line, say hello in the lonely world of neon.
You're not that lonely, surely. But what we'll do is I'll make sure that all those links are included in the show notes. So Kate,
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for being my guest today. It was lovely chatting with you. May all of 2024 go well and finding the tribe, the dent work. And I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thank you, Kirsty. Thanks for having me.